Hello, everyone, and welcome. As you come in, we're excited to welcome you. It is the top of the hour in most places. I think there are still a couple of time zones that are at the half hour, but we will assume that everyone here, it's the top of the hour, no matter where you are. So we're going to get started. Welcome to scenario-based instructor-led training. We're really excited about this webinar. We've gotten so much feedback from people as we've led up to this on LinkedIn and in responses to our emails. My name is Tim Waxenfelder. I'm co-founder of Endurance Learning, and I will be playing the role of your producer today, doing whatever I can to support the webinar. Endurance Learning, we are a full service training company. We offer everything related to training. And when we don't, we help organizations find the services that they need to support their training needs. But we do most of it. Since 2015, we've been doing this for a wide range of customers, from nonprofits to major corporations. And so we always encourage you, if you know someone who needs training support in any way, from designing training to consulting on training to helping figure out organizational development issues, we are here. We encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn. We share information there constantly, and we're trying to connect with people and constantly build that community on LinkedIn. I would encourage you to stick around to the end of the webinar because we have a couple of drawings, as we always do at the end of our webinars. And so far, everyone that has won has been really delighted with the resources we've shared. So the first drawing will be for one of Brian's two books. And I'll introduce Brian in a few moments, but you probably know that he has Instructional Design on a Shoestring and What's Your Formula, two very different books to support professionals in the training field, as we've always tried to support professionals. And those books are wonderful. They're on my shelf. They're on all my colleagues' shelves, and hopefully on a lot of shelves of our attendees as well. We also have a drawing for one of a couple of courses that we offer. They really help people build up those basic skills on training design, training delivery, and basics of L&D. Not all of us come from a background of having, going through an instructional design master's degree. Those are our opportunity to give you a different way to build those skills. So, as you know, we do this monthly. Registration is now open for next month's webinar, giving better feedback to trainers. You'll see it on the slide soon. Oh, I skipped a slide that I didn't know about. Go back a slide, Brian. World-class training. This is when we talk about what we offer. One of our newest offerings, or at least newest to list on the website, is that we offer a lot of sessions. They're similar to what we do in the webinar, but they're not the same thing. So they can be in person or virtual, and they're really focused on specific topics. This could be an in-service lunch and learn, hour and a half training to really build up skills for your colleagues, for your staff. They're a wonderful experience, and we hear so much positive about these webinars, and they can be customized to match your needs. And you'll see Rachel just posted a link to those. They're really wonderful. Okay, now let's talk about next month's webinar. It is about giving feedback to trainers. It's a topic that we get so many questions about, and so we wanted to do a webinar on it. It's on Thursday, June 11th, 1 p.m., same time. We really hope you can join us for that. We also want to do something a little bit different. I think you've seen us start to do this if you've attended before. We're trying to gather more feedback. So Brian and I have sent a lot of personal messages to people on LinkedIn, but we have a little poll up in a LinkedIn post on Endurance Learning LinkedIn page. Now, I am not usually one to say, hey, we're training you and we're trying to keep your attention. Now go out and look at a social media site. But I'm gonna excuse it in this situation and say, if you want to jump out there right now and go answer a question, you get the opportunity to help shape what next month's webinar looks like. So this is getting close. We're starting to customize and really design these for your needs. And so we would love to get that feedback. So please do that poll. We'll post the poll again that on that LinkedIn page toward the end of the webinar. So you'll have another chance. If you're just getting settled, you don't have to you don't have to head out to social media yet. Um, so now let me switch gears here. So your presenter day, I am not your presenter. And hopefully his internet connection holds up so I don't have to jump in and be your presenter. Uh, Brian Washburn is my co-founder at Endurance Learning. He has been in the world of training for at least 25 years, depending on how you calculate it. Most of his career was spent leading training teams in the nonprofit sector. We've continued that work at Endurance Learning. He's continued to support nonprofits, but it's also been corporations and other organizations. As I mentioned before, he's published 2 full-length books. Anybody who's tried to write a book before should know that's no easy feat. Maybe it's gotten easier with AI, but he did this all before AI was writing books for people. One fun fact about Brian is that if you really want to get his support on something and you don't have money to pay him, if you invite him to somewhere like Snohomish County, north of Seattle in Washington, and go to the Snohomish Pie Company and take him out for pie, you can pretty much get him to do anything. It is I won't use the word bribe, but it's a wonderful bribe, and he is going to take it every single time, no matter how many times you do it. So that is the way. Probably the quickest way to Brian's heart is pie, which I appreciate. I love pie as well. So now let me hand it over to my wonderful co-founder, Brian Washburn.
Thank you, Tim. And pie, whether it's pie, ice cream, or Mr. Sketch markers, those are 3 very easy ways to get my attention. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about critical thinking skills and how to develop those critical thinking skills in a training environment, and what are some of the different things we can do. Now, if you are anything like I am, you do have your go-to activities. I know that I use my go-to activities, maybe overuse those activities sometimes. And sometimes they aren't always the best activities for the logistics of the session, whether that's the number of people that are attending, or the amount of time that we have in order to get through an activity. And that brings me to a quote that comes up from time to time, and I'm going to use this quote in the context of instructional design. If all you have is a hammer, it's tempting to treat everything like a nail, and that can go to sometimes our go-to activities as well. So today, as you know, we're talking about scenario-based instructor-led training. We're actually going to talk a little bit about scenario-based instructor-led training, and we'll talk a little bit about case studies. We'll talk about some other things too. There are lots of ways to get people thinking critically in a training session. Scenarios are just one of those ways. And so before we started with this webinar, when you signed up, you got an email, and many people responded to that email that had 2 questions. One is, are you using scenarios right now in your training session? And many people said they do. And then the other question was, what do you hope to learn? Now, during this webinar. And now, when it goes back to the scenarios question, scenarios is one of those things can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. And so when it comes to scenarios, when you say that you use scenarios in your instructor-led training, I'm curious, what kind of scenarios are you using? So we're going to put up a poll here, to just kind of try to figure out and to give me an idea, what kind of scenarios are you actually using? And so let's launch this poll here. This first poll is basically, when you think of scenarios, are you using scenarios? Are you equating that with case studies? Are they participant generated scenarios? So are you getting your participants to share something that they encounter and then kind of working through that during your training session? Are you using like choose your own adventure style scenarios? I know that last month when we were talking about engaging, challenging participants, we used some branching scenarios, choose your own adventure style scenarios. Or are you doing something different? And if you are doing something different when it comes to scenarios, I'd love to see what that is, what that means to you, using the chat. So I'm going to give you a few moments to go ahead and finish this poll here, and we'll see what kind of other scenario-based activities people might be using in the chat, and then we're going to go ahead and press on with this webinar. So scenarios with open discussion questions. personal stories where choices were made in the course of achieving a desired outcome. Yeah, and so we use acting out scenarios, and so that could be similar to something like role play. Scenarios are based on the topic of the workshop, what I know about participants and what I know of their work setting. So maybe even changing things up based on what you know about the participants. Situational role plays. Okay, perfect. So keep those coming in. I'd love to see what you mean by scenarios. And we are going to be talking about several different approaches to developing critical thinking skills here. Let's go ahead and end this poll. We'll share the results here. And basically, when people are thinking of scenarios, a lot of people think case studies in one fashion or another. Some people are actually using choose your own adventure style scenarios. And so we're going to talk about that, and maybe even what you have in mind when it comes to choose your own adventure might be the same or might be different than what we're going to be talking about here. And then I see that some other people are typing some things into the chat. So that is helpful context for this. And so, first of all, before I really drill into several approaches, several types of instructional activities that can help us to develop some critical thinking skills, let's talk about a range of different strategies to kind of introduce critical thinking skills into our participants. Because sometimes we want people to kind of digest information, but a lot of times we want people to be able to do something and use those skills that we teach people through a variety of different strategies. We can do that. So obviously, case studies are one way to do that. Participant generated scenarios where we listen to what participants are going through and try to kind of jump in, so it's really more meaningful and relevant to our participants. Sometimes critical thinking skills can simply be developed through not just accepting the first answer that people give to a question that we might toss out to small groups or to a large group, but then trying to dig deeper, kind of that Socratic questioning method. So it could be things like, that great answer. Can you give me an example of that? Right. So we ask people to think a little bit deeper, or that's an interesting response. Now, when you think of that, what assumptions are you making when you say that? Or it could be, that is definitely one way to go. What could be some consequences that come out of that, or what might be some unintended consequences when you go that way? So, Socratic questioning, kind of going deeper than just accepting that first response, in order to get people thinking a little bit more deeply, a little bit more critically about some of the things that they're answering during a session. Could be other strategies are problem-based learning and immersive simulations, which they're kind of similar, where we give people a challenge to start the session, and have them work through it, whether it's on their own or a group. It can be during one session, it could be over the course of several sessions, but there's some different ways to do that. And then, of course, we've mentioned people say that they're using role play, and even branching scenarios. And it's these last two things that I want to spend some time on. And I'm gonna go through, and maybe we'll be able to do some other webinars in the future that cover some of these other strategies. What makes for an effective case study, or what are 100 questions that we could ask that get people thinking a little bit more deeply. So kind of going into that Socratic questioning method. But let's talk about role plays and branching scenarios. And before I do that, I want to just kind of give a definition in terms of how I'm using these terms over the course of the next 46 minutes. So when it comes to role plays are live, true to life simulations that force the learners to say the words they'd use in a real situation. And sorry, hold on one second. And then when it comes to, so with role play, what we're having people do is not just kind of say, this is what I would do in a situation, but they actually have to respond to the situation and say the words they would use. This goes a little bit deeper than just a case study. A lot of times when people are introduced to role plays, they'll roll their eyes, they'll groan. I don't know of many training groups that I've led or facilitated where people hear that we're going to do a role play and they're like, "Yes, we're going to do role play." So often people groan, they think, role play. And there's some reasons for that, and there's some justified reasons for that. Role plays can be tricky to actually make realistic. But the value in role play is that people can't just kind of talk in theory. This is what I would do, right? They have to say the words and they have to practice using the words, and then they have to get feedback on whether or not the words that they were using or the response that they were offering is what we're expecting in the real world. But it's better that we practice it in a practice setting and training setting than the first time they actually say the words is in real life. So there's definitely value to role play. I'm going to talk a little bit when I was asking what are some of the things that you hope to learn or some of the challenges that you have with some of the different scenarios you're using. A lot of people mentioned role play. They mentioned, how do I make it so that the role play isn't hokey, isn't resolved too quickly or too easily? So I'm going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about branching scenarios here. And when I talk about branching scenarios, I'm talking about a structured kind of choose your own adventure style narrative where each choice leads to specific consequences and new set of options. So it's not an open-ended, all right, so here's part of the situation. What would you do next, right? That's one way to do choose your own adventure. But what I'm talking about here is very similar to the choose your own adventure books that we might have read when we were younger, where you read a little bit of a scenario and then you have three choices, and then you turn to a different page in the packet that might be given to you based on the choice that you have. Again, we did this last month. I'm gonna give you an example of this in just a few minutes. But let's talk about, these are both really good to develop some um, uh, critical thinking skills. But when might we want to use one over the other? Again, going back to this idea of if all we have is a hamper, everything looks like a nail, then if we're only using role play, if that's the only tool in our tool belt, then sometimes it might not be the best use. Or if you're in this webinar and you're like, oh, let's do branching scenarios, let's do them all. I get really excited when I learn something new, but it's not always the most appropriate use. And so sometimes when it comes to role play versus branching scenarios, we need to kind of ask ourselves, how big is our audience? The bigger an audience gets, the more difficult it is to kind of take a look at how everybody's doing role play, right? You can have a room of 100, 200 people, and you can have people doing role plays, but you as a facilitator won't be able to actually give people some feedback the larger a group gets, the less feedback you're going to be able to give individually. So that could be a situation where you want to do something that's more structured on paper or something like that. Could be a branching scenario, might be the best solution there. Another question to ask is how much time do you have? Because again, when it comes to doing effective role play, we want to make sure that there's adequate time in order to give instruction so people know what the expected kind of behaviors that they're supposed to be demonstrating are. And then we need to give everybody an opportunity to practice, because one of the things that drives me nuts with role play is when only, like, if we're in small groups, there's four of us, only one person gets to go. And if I'm the person that has to go and nobody else gets to go, but everybody's just going to watch me, that's not a great feeling. And so we have to make sure that we have adequate time for role play for everybody to kind of rotate roles. If we don't have adequate time, we might want to do something that's a little bit shorter and again, a little bit more structured, such as a branching scenario, case study, things like that. Does everyone in the group need to be exposed to the exact same? Does every group, if we're working in small groups, do they all need to be exposed to the exact same information? With role plays, a lot of times when you have five different small groups that are working on role plays, you might get five different scenarios playing out. Whereas if we are to give people kind of a scenario, a common scenario, then people are going to get very similar information and very similar experiences out of that. And then how important is it to feel and or be on the receiving end of emotions? So if emotions and whether you as somebody who's practicing the skill needs to be able to weather emotions and respond appropriately, or you just need to figure out what does it feel like to be saying the words. Role play is a much, much more effective solution than something that can be kind of cold or emotionless, like a scenario or a case study or something like that. So, if feeling or being on the receiving end of emotion is important, that might be an opportunity for role play. I love the comments that are coming up in the chat also. So please do keep supplementing some of the things that I'm sharing with some of the things that you are discovering in the chat. One more big question to ask yourself, and maybe it's the underlying question or the major question to think about is, does the success of the task at hand depend more on the learner's logic? So is it more process based? And that might be a branching scenario, right? So logic, if this, then this. So we could be talking about steps of a process or things like that. Or is it the learner's delivery that is more important? And that goes back to the emotion piece, but also being able to say the right words in the right way. And that's something that a role play might be most appropriate for. So let's I'm gonna just kind of throw up a few questions here and get a feel for the pulse of the room right now in terms of what people are thinking when it comes to role play or branching scenario. So when it comes to role play or branching scenario, Tim, if we could put up this first poll here, a question. I'd love to know if you were to do a session to introduce the steps to your organization's customer service process for a group of 120 new customer service reps. Do you think that you would do role play or would you use a branching scenario? And so again, is this logic versus emotion? How many people are there? How much time do you have to do it? Now I don't mention time here, but 120 people, that's a lot of people to do something. So we'll give a few more moments here for your responses. Yep, role play. Absolutely. I'm seeing some comments about role playing and how it can be awkward, especially if everyone doesn't buy in. And we're going to talk about role play, like giving role play structure in just a second. All right. So let's end this poll. We're going to go ahead and share the results here. A lot of people are saying branching scenario for this particular scenario, and I would agree. I can see why role play could be helpful when we're talking about customer service, especially now with its 120 people. Again, sometimes it depends on the room size and how much time we have in this, and how we're going to do this. But in general, if I was just to take a look at this scenario on the surface, I would say that's a lot of people to kind of keep a role play without getting unruly and being able to give people enough feedback. I might go with the branching scenario on this one. So let's go to the next scenario here, and we'll put up another poll. And this poll talks about a session on de-escalating conflict between two employees for about 10 new managers. So, do you think that this should be role play or a branching scenario? And again, there's no bad answer, but there might be an answer that's better than any of the others. So, for a session on branching, a session on de-escalating conflict between two employees for a group of 10 new managers. I'm seeing lots of thoughts in the chat, so I'm not sure what's happening with our polling, but no poll came up. But people are saying role play, and so I agree with the role play in the chat. So and I'm seeing it's unanimous. I've never had a poll this big that's unanimous, and so yes, I think this one is absolutely. We'll go ahead and end this poll, and we'll share the results here. But this one. W- uh, technology fails here. So this one, when it comes to a relatively small group, and you're talking about de-escalating conflict, a role play might be more effective here than a sort of branching scenario. I could see the benefit of a branching scenario. So when with branching scenarios, you might think, okay, can I play this out? What does this look like 2 or 3 decisions down the road? And we could all take a look at that. With a group of 10 managers, we can probably do that in a role play setting. So let's take a look at just one more. I have several more here, but we'll just take a look at one more because I want to get into some of the activities here too. So role play or branching scenario, a session on coaching employees by using open-ended questions during one-on-one sessions. So we're talking about working with managers maybe on how they coach employees during one-on-one sessions. Would you do a role play or branching scenario? This one's interesting. We have a little bit of a split here, although we're starting to see a clear leader emerge. Go ahead and get those final votes in. And let's
Brian,
go ahead and end this.
I'll click the button. What's happening is we're both clicking the buttons.
Yes, too
So
many
don't click
people.
the buttons.
I'm clicking too many buttons at the same
Don't click any
time.
buttons.
I apologize. Oh, it's my control, the need to control things. I have an issue with that. All right, so with this one, people are saying for almost half the people said role play branches. Again, I can there can be an argument made on either side of this. If we're talking about coaching and saying the words, this might be better for a role play scenario. Now, I have some other questions, but I want to get into some of this stuff, and so we'll jump over this one. And let's take a closer look at role play because I'm seeing some comments here about how role play can be awkward, how role play can be hokey, how role play people don't buy into it. So, actually, let me ask you this question. When it comes to role play, what is the most challenging thing about using role play in training? So go ahead and hit me in the chat with all of your challenges with role play, and I'm going to see if I can solve those challenges in 3 steps. So let's take a look. What do we have? Yes, Beverly's telling me to trust the producer. Yep, that is a lesson I need to learn.
The producer is not totally trustworthy. He was not ready for the first poll, hence he created a lack of trust by the presenter.
That's right. The circle of trust was broken.
Exactly.
Getting people to participate, engagement, getting people to truly engage. People fear about looking bad doing role play. Yes, all of these things are legitimate, right? And when people hear role play, a lot of times anxiety takes hold over the room. When anxiety goes up, the ability to learn goes down. So we have to figure out how do we do role play in a little bit of a safe environment. I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 3 elements that we have used with endurance learning that we found to help mitigate some of the challenges. They don't eliminate the challenges because naturally people have a visceral reaction to the idea of role play. But here are some things that we've done that have helped to mitigate some of the challenges with role play. And one is, and this is the most common piece that anybody uses in role play, but and the example I'm giving you here is taken from an a training that we did with an IT department several years ago, where they were looking to help improve the customer service abilities of IT staff within the organization's IT department. And so the first thing we did was for the learner, and oftentimes this is kind of where role plays start and stop, right? So, what is the scenario that people have to actually act out? And the person who needs to practice the skills gets something, or maybe everybody kind of sees what the person who has to practice the skills sees. Now, in this situation, we had 2 cards and we didn't want people to see what card the other people got. So, in this particular example, we split people up into groups of 3 and one person had to be the learner, had to be the IT customer service person, right? So that's the skill that's being taught. And here, what we did was we gave the learner a prompt, but we didn't want them to share it with anybody else. Just like in real life, nobody knows what's happening with everybody else's kind of intent or motivation or what's going on in their mind. So here we had a help desk agent. You receive a call from somebody in your organization who's well known across your IT department for calling the help desk at least once, usually more per week, asking for help on issues ranging from where to find certain software whose icons don't appear on their desktop screen to how to connect a Bluetooth speaker so they can listen to music while at work. When this call comes through, you quickly check the help desk ticket request and realize you haven't heard from this person for the past few weeks. That's all you know about the situation, right? So this gives you the context, and now you have to be ready for whatever that person's going to say. Now, in a typical role play, everybody kind of sees this, and then somebody's kind of responsible for kind of ad-libbing, doing some improv, figuring out, okay, what's a request I can have now? But what the second thing we do is we give the counterpart a card, a prompt, and that person doesn't share it with the learner, right? With the person who's supposed to handle this. Because again, if you're in the IT department, you don't know. You don't have like you're not omniscient. You're not all knowing. You don't know what the other person is going to come to you with. So the counterpart has a secret prompt, and it goes something like this. So you call the help desk to let them know you can't access any websites. You let the help desk know that you've been traveling recently prior to your travel, and even during your travel, this wasn't a problem. But now that you're back in the office, you just can't access any websites. And that's all you have to do unless the learner, right, the IT rep, asks the questions they should be asking, and only then can you give more information. And that is this second part here. So only if the help desk asks can you share a little bit more information. If they don't ask this, this situation won't resolve and it'll be frustrating, but that's where the debrief comes in, right? But if they do ask, then you can share that now that you think of it, someone in one of the regional offices from which you were working remotely during your travel made a few changes to your settings so that you could access their Wi-Fi connection while you're on site. Ah, there's something. But again, this is working on critical thinking skills and not just saying, okay, well, what's your problem? But starting to try to ask some questions and figure out what the problem is. Now, there's a third person here. Now, this is another part where sometimes the role play can get a little hokey, where people are just like, yeah, it was good. Or, I would have done that a little differently, right? So when people get the third person, the observer, when they are observing, they need some structure in order to be able to give valuable feedback. And so what we did for this particular situation was we gave an observation form that really structured and focused what people were observing for. In this particular instance, we were trying to teach 4 skills for the customer service, right? So the process was you have to listen to what the person's saying, repeat back to them what you heard, clarify with any questions that you might have, and then make sure that you document what comes up, right? So making sure that you can take notes on the situation. So we really wanted people to practice what they would be doing in real life. And this is what the observer should be giving feedback on. So those are the 3 elements that we have found that have changed the idea of role play. Now, people still are like, oh, role play. But when they get into it, they every single person involved in the small groups has a specific role and specific information that they should be following. They give a motivation, they have intent, which has really helped us when it comes to role play to make sure that it's not too loosey-goosey and it has some structure to it. So for us, that's been something that we've found very helpful. And I see that in the some of the comments here, people are starting to share some of the things that have worked for them too. So if you have found something that has helped for you when it comes to role play beyond what you're seeing here, I'd love to see any of those other thoughts in the chat. And that can be something where 112 heads are better than just one head. So go ahead and feel free to share if you found something that works for you. If you want some more information about this, I'm always happy to talk a little bit more in depth. However, what I want to do now is I want to shift our focus. So role play is one piece. I think people are generally familiar with that. The other thing that I want to do is take a closer look at scenarios. So we're not going to be able to actually do a role play here, but I just wanted to kind of walk through that. Now, let's take a look at scenarios, specifically branching scenarios. Now, if you were here, I believe it was last month, talking about how do you engage challenging participants, you had a chance to go through what it felt like to do a branching scenario. And remember, this is kind of a choose your own adventure type of thing. So if you were here last month, I apologize because we're going to kind of repeat. For those who are not here, this is what the branching scenario kind of looks and feels like. We're going to go through it relatively quickly just so you can get the gist of what it is. So for this particular scenario, we were talking about when we're facilitating, how do we engage people who are having side conversations all the time? So with this particular case, following the first several activities on the first day of a 3-day workshop, you notice that most participants have been focused and willing to participate in a variety of activities, and most participants are listening. They're making eye contact, they're nodding their heads during moments in which you make a presentation or deliver a short lecture. As you approach your morning break, you have noticed, however, that 2 participants at your table to your right seem to have spent more time whispering and talking to each other than they have been participating in actual activities. So if this was a case study, you might end it here and say, okay, so as a facilitator, what might you do? And then you can have some conversation. That's fine. For this particular situation, what we did was we gave people 3 choices. Okay, so this is a setup, and now we have 3 choices. So the first thing you can do is you can keep an eye on the situation and see if the behavior continues, but for the moment, we don't need to address this quite yet. Maybe that's one way you want to go. Or maybe before the break, you decide to just make a general comment to everybody about being respectful and staying focused on the activities and discussions in the workshop. So kind of a big picture announcement. Hopefully it lands to those specific people who have been having some side conversations. Or during the break, you notice that one of the participants has been having side conversations. They're sitting at the table, So you decide to say something to this participant. So here, instead of kind of stopping and leaving it open-ended, what would you do here? We have some different choices here. Now, it may not be the exact thing that everybody would choose, but let's have some choices. So for the fun, for the sake of it, I'm going to throw it back to Tim to put up a poll here. We can take a poll and just real quick, with your gut, what would you do in this situation? I'll give you a few moments here to respond to this. We'll give you 5 more seconds. Four, three, two, one. Let's go ahead and publish that poll, share the results. So it looks like most people in this particular room, about more than half people have said before the break you decide to make a general comment, right? So that's what we'll do. Based on what this group wants to do, we're going to go with choice B here. So with this, we'll advance to this is kind of the impact of the situation, right? So here we go. We make a general announcement, and there are consequences to that choice, or there's going to be a reaction to that choice. So the room goes quiet as you deliver your reminder about staying focused and respecting the learning environment. And for a few minutes, the two participants in question stopped talking and looked directly at their workbooks. However, because the feedback was directed at everyone, the participants who were following the rules looked confused or slightly defensive, while the two offenders seemed to assume you were talking about someone else. This happens to me all the time. When a general announcement is made and I haven't been doing anything that I think is against the rules, and somebody makes that announcement, I'm like, oh my God, what was I doing? What was it me? Are they thinking about me? I know I did glance at my phone once, right? So that's what's happening here. So within 20 minutes, as the next small group activity begins, they're back to whispering, seemingly emboldened by the fact that you didn't address them directly. All right, so this is something where in a case study you would have just stopped. What would you have done? We don't know what the consequences would have been. Here we're seeing kind of a cascading effect of different things, and then we come up with some different choices. We can do some different things, and we have some more choices. I'm not going to go through this whole scenario because we did this last month. I just wanted to give you an example of what this looked like. So maybe we decide to physically restructure. Okay, they're still at it, so maybe we're going to physically restructure the environment by announcing a scramble after the next break, and then there's some results. Now, here's the thing about a branching scenario. We can end it here and say, okay, how did that work out? What would you have done differently? Or we can also choose to go back to the beginning and we can also choose to go back to the beginning and let's try it again. It didn't give us the results we wanted. How can we do something different next time? So let's take a look at those choices again. Maybe instead of B, maybe we want to do C this time, right? So that's the nice thing about a branching scenario is that you can spend 15 minutes talking about it. You can spend an hour talking about it. It really depends on how much time you have and how correct you want them to get the answers. The other thing to branching scenarios is oftentimes there's not one obvious right answer or wrong answer because it's like real life, right? So there's some different ways to go. So again, we kind of go through this, and we could do it again and then again, or we can just kind of say, all right, that was a great conversation. Let's move on. Right. So, what does this look like behind the scenes? Now, this is where we want to get to with today's session. What does this look like behind the scenes? So, in order to create something like this, I have a template here that I've been using that we're going to share with you all in just a few minutes. And basically, what we need to do is to figure out what the initial prompt is. So, for this particular example, it was we're leading a session, some people are talking. All right, so there's the initial situation. That's where oftentimes case studies stop. But with this, we're going to give three options. You could do A, B, or C. Now, when you're planning this, it helps to be structured and strategic. Otherwise, it can get kind of unruly. So I like to say, okay, well, with option one, option A, this is the impact of that option, and this is what could happen as a result of it. And I like to keep going down that hole of number one until I'm done with the situation. And then I go on to options two, option three, whatever it might be. Now, this is a very short simulation. As you saw, there's two choices to be made, and then we have some conclusions. You obviously can do more options than this, but Just beware, it can get pretty complex pretty quickly. Now, I want to give you a chance to, and I know that some people are actually using these already, but what we're going to do is we're going to take about 15 minutes in small groups. And what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a challenge here where you're going to create a branching scenario that's focused on de-escalation. And remember, any choices that you give, you want to make sure that they're plausible, right? You don't want to say, somebody came in, they're yelling, and immediately you call the police. I don't know if that is the first thing that you do. Maybe you do. It depends on the situation, I guess. But there can be more than one right choice or path, or there could be degrees of right and wrong. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a document. And with this document, if you need to refer back to or see how I created that branching scenario, up at the top of the left-hand side where we have the tabs, you can see a sample of it. But then what I want you to do is in your groups, I want you to kind of create something. So the situation at hand is that we have a situation where you have to de-escalate a frustrated customer who's called repeatedly and they keep receiving conflicting information. They don't have time for more calls, so they want to speak with someone in person who can give them the correct information, and they want to be sure this information will not change tomorrow, right? So they're coming into your space, and they're frustrated. And so the objective here is they're in a public space, whether you are working at a bank and they're kind of in the lobby, or if you're in a childcare center and they come into the front entrance or in the classroom, you have somebody who's upset. So you have to decide this is all I want you to do here in your small groups. Decide where the most appropriate place to engage this person would be. So create a scenario focused on this, where people have to make choices and decide, are you going to have a conversation right here? Are you going to ask people to come to the office, step outside, whatever it might be that you want them to do. All right, so we're going to in the chat, we are going to uh, hopefully give you a Google Doc and see if it works. It looks like it's working now. I apologize for that when it comes to the permissions. Um, but it's looking like it works now, hopefully. Um, Tim,
Yep,
did
we're
you?
seeing people in it, so we should be good on that front.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to give you about 15 minutes in your small groups to try to come up with a branching scenario. So the initial prompt and then some options, and what's going to be the result of those options using this template. You may not get through the whole thing. Don't panic. But what I want you to do is to start to go through this process and see what it feels like to try to create something like this. Is there anything else that you want to mention, Tim, before we put them
Just
in
a
chat?
reminder, so you can see if you haven't used Google Docs before with tabs, it's a newer feature, and so there's tabs down the left. So you can click on the sample. We're going to be working in the general room document if you're not able to go into a breakout room. But if you are in breakout room number 6, then you're clicking on breakout room 6, and that's where your team is working. Do the best you can. These are difficult formats to work in. So even when it says turn to page, you can mark the path option number there. Don't worry about it being perfect. It's really about beginning to experience it.
And if you can't get into the Google Docs, somebody else in your group should be able to. So you don't have to sit out the activity. And in your small groups, you'll be able to share each other's screens.
Okay, I'm going to launch the groups. Good luck, everyone.
All right, for those that can't get into their breakout rooms, we're going to bring this up here in just a moment here in the general room. I'm just going to wait for everybody to get over into those breakout rooms. All right. So here we go. We have the general room here, which is always kind of the folks that couldn't get into the breakout rooms, or maybe the folks who have gotten up and taken a step away. But here, what I want to do is just take advantage of the next few minutes that we have together to kind of talk through what does this process look like when we're trying to create, when we're trying to when we're trying to create a branching scenario. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to take a look at, and I'll try to make this a little bit bigger so you can kind of see what's happening on my screen. Take a look at the scenario. So we're looking to de-escalate a situation with a frustrated customer who's called repeatedly and keeps receiving conflicting information. They don't have time for more calls. So they want to speak with someone in person who can give them the correct information. They want to be sure this information will not change tomorrow. So one of the things that I didn't mention in the session when I was kind of going through this was that that I use AI to help me work through something like this. And so I'm just going to kind of talk through what that could look like as we create something like this, because I can't take everybody off of mute, so I'm not going to be able to hear some different thoughts on this one. So I'm just going to kind of take you through the process that I've used in the past. So when it comes to this scenario, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll pull up Gemini and we'll figure out where should we start. So I have a scenario here that I'm just going to capture, and I'm bringing it over to Gemini. And what I'm going to do is say, help me create a branching uh, activity with three different options based on this prompt. And I'll let Gemini get me started. We have the prompt, and then we have some different responses. Now, one of the things with AI is when we just give it kind of that general prompt, it gives us it wants to resolve all of our situations. So here we have the likely outcome, why it's important, what the customer reaction is, which may or may not be helpful. For me, for a branching scenario, I don't want all that information. So I'm going to come back to this and I'm going to say, redo the situation to give me an overall scenario and three potential options um, or reactions, uh, three potential choices that I could make when it comes to deciding where to have this conversation. Do not give me customer reactions. Just give me the choices I can make. And the reason I want to show this to you is because a lot of times people think, oh, AI will do everything really quickly. And as you can see, this needs to be kind of refined a little bit here. So um, we have a little bit more information here. You're the senior lead at a regional customer service center. So it gives me a little bit of a situation here, which we can use. We can refine it, right? Based on our situation. If we're in a bank, we want to make it sure it's a bank. If we're in an early learning center, we want to kind of focus on that. If we are in if we're in Costco, if we're trying to teach people customer service in the Costco tire center, we might want to refine it to that. But here we have several different choices, right? So we can invite the customer into the building's main lobby. We can redirect the in-person demand to a video consultation, or we can meet the customer at a nearby satellite branch. Right. So again, I don't. These aren't necessarily the choices that I would want. So I would sit there and I would try to refine these and make sure that it is specific to the situation that I want. So I would say let's refine this a little more. We are working in a bank and the customer has come in frustrated and no longer wants to talk on the phone. When it comes, so give me an opening scenario that is no longer than three sentences, and then give me three choices when it comes to options I have about where to have this conversation. And this gives me a little bit more refinement in terms of what I have. So again, the idea of using AI to make our jobs easier can be helpful. Even going through 4 or 5 minutes of refinements is a lot easier than me trying to come up with something off the top of my head, and spending 30, 45, 60 minutes trying to come up with an initial scenario. So I have something that starts here. And then we have some different options. So we can either do it right here in the open banking section. We can bring the person into, a lot of times banks have open glass offices, so you can actually see what's happening, but you can't necessarily hear people. And then we can bring them kind of inside to a controlled conference room. So this is one of the ways that we can actually come up with branching scenarios, but it doesn't have to be onerous. We can use different tools that are available to us, and then we can kind of refine the situation as it resolves itself. Now, that's one way that we can do it. Let's take a look and see what some other folks are doing right now when it comes to some of the different breakout rooms. So people are using the scenario that's up here, and then it's a matter of I like these choices actually. Find a quiet place where they can vent their frustrations, match their energy, meet them where they are, and then ask them if they'd like to meet you in a more private place. So we have some thoughts here, and then there are some kind of responses that could come in there. Tim, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just so that you know, they did not they had access but not edit access. So we went about 2 minutes in where they were in the document but not editing. As soon as I turned that on and broadcast that, we started to get more. So they're a little bit behind, but a few of the rooms have some good activity. The challenge, we talk about challenge of scenarios and role play. The challenge of breakout rooms is a very real challenge that I think goes up there with role play. Has the same emotional impact.
It That it does. And when it comes to some of this stuff, so thank you for bearing with us here in the general room when for those folks that couldn't get into the breakout rooms, because one of the challenges with doing webinars in general is making sure, especially using Google Docs, is making sure that as many people have access to it and that everything is set up in
Yeah, because there are
advance.
we've had some people say Google Docs was blocked by their company. You're just always, it's good lessons as a trainer. You saw Brian and I have challenges at the beginning of this webinar with polls because I was coming off another presentation right as we started the webinar and didn't do a very good job of jumping in as producer. And, it's about preparation and backup plans and admitting when something goes wrong and finding ways for people to interact. So I think we've seen quite a bit. There are quite a few rooms. We only have 7 breakout rooms, so you don't need to go that far down.
I was going to say, wow.
What's wrong with breakout rooms 8 to 16? Yeah.
So we're going to give people another minute or two. It looks like they're starting to get some thoughts in there in terms of how this would work for them, and then we're going to bring everybody back. It looks like Donna, you've had your hand up patiently, so I'm not sure if we can take you off of mute, but let's go ahead and try it and see if there's something that you wanted to jump in here for, or maybe not. All right. Well, let's bring it back. We're gonna bring it back to the large group, and we'll end this breakout room in, I guess, 60 seconds, Tim, if we could do that.
Sure can. Okay, I'm going to close the rooms and deal with their participant ire when they say I haven't given them the full minute since the last warning. But we're at 5 minutes till, so we're going to wrap this part up.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Looks like we are back from the breakout rooms. Thank you for humoring me. I know that we had to cut the time a little bit short, but we're getting close to the top of the hour. Boy, does time fly. Just real quick, I would love to hear if there's anybody who wants to share what were some of the what was it like to go through just this process real quick? I know there wasn't a ton of time to work through it, but the idea of inserting logic into a scenario and trying to figure out what would be somebody's reaction to this and how do we do this. It looks like Emily has her hand up. You can go ahead and take yourself. There we go.
Okay,
Go ahead.
now can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Um, what was it like? It was fun, but a little bit confusing as we through possible options. And one of my questions was, so you have an option, and almost always there are more than one thing that could happen if they choose that option. There could be escalation, there could be de-escalation. So when you're creating the scenarios and all the responses, do you just choose one of those?
Yeah, that's and I love that question because it's one of the challenges to this, right? So we can't do every single thing. So just pick a person maybe who you've had this similar scenario with as you're designing this, or try to figure out, okay, with just one person, how difficult do we want to make this scenario? Do we want it to be mild, medium, or spicy, right? So there's different ways that somebody could go through it. Oftentimes, I will kind of take the mild to medium type of approach, where there's lots of different ways that people could respond. But if people are engaging and using the skills that we want them to be using, oftentimes I will make the response reasonable, right? So, what's a reasonable way that somebody could respond in this situation? There always are those exceptions that we're always trying to be practicing for, right? Those 5% of situations or the 2% of people, they could do this. Well, what would most people do in this situation? And that's kind of the route that I will typically choose. That which isn't to say that we can't talk about some other ways that people could react during the debrief. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure that people understood is one of the benefits to doing something like this, as opposed to just doing a case study where it's kind of a situation and then open-ended, or even using technology, right? Creating a chatbot that is programmed to respond. So what's your response? And then it will give you a response. Sometimes even something like that doesn't give you the power of the debrief. And so when we're debriefing this conversation, we can talk about all sorts of things. We can go back and review other choices. Why did we choose this? What were we thinking about? What's another way that somebody could respond? Because they could get really upset if you were to say that too. In this situation, they didn't. What would happen if they got really upset, right? So we can talk about all those different things in the debrief. But for the purposes of this story, we don't want to be paralyzed by saying, well, it could go four different ways. Choose one, and then I like to try to figure out what would most people do in that situation, and then we go on.
Hmm.
All right. We thank you so much, Emily, for that question and the response that to the question that I had. But let's go ahead. I know that we're at time here, so I just wanted to thank people for this particular your participation here and jumping in. That Google Doc. Even though people couldn't necessarily type into it right away, is going to be available. If you want to return to it, kind of take a look and see what you were doing, you're more than welcome to go and check that out as we get going. So next month, we do have another session that is coming up, and this session will be specifically about when we're observing trainers, or if we ourselves are being observed, what's the best way to give feedback to trainers? So using structure to move from subjective opinions, yeah, that's great. I loved your energy, things like that, to objective growth. And there's a QR code here if you wanted to sign up for that. It'll be June 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific. If you'd like to join us and follow us on Endurance Learning, we'd love to have you join us. Tim mentioned that any of these sessions, we can actually bring these to your organizations if you think that would be really helpful. So just kind of give us a heads up, shoot us a note, and we're happy to join you. That said, thank you so much for joining us here today. And in just a moment, we're going to